For Veterans Day, we started out just talking about the various wars that we've had, focusing on World War II and the Vietnam War. Through the Smartboard, we looked at different memorials and different monuments that they have for some of these wars, for the survivors of those wars. Talked about the honor flights and the Vietnam, the wall in Washington, D.C. And we also talked about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, and we watched a couple different video clips about the changing of the guards and how they do that, and all the different facts and the interesting things that those soldiers have to do and continue to do throughout their lives. And then I thought it would be fun to have somebody come in and just talk to the class. And my grandfather was in World War II. He was a vet, or he is a veteran of World War II. So I asked him to come in and just talk to the class about his experiences in the war. And so he came in, and that kind of got me started thinking about just getting all different opinions and different viewpoints of what happened to these soldiers in the war. So I originally was going to have the students write to veterans from my hometown, which is back in Minnesota. And just to see, for me it would have been interesting to see the stories and to hear the stories of those veterans just because I know those people. And so then it kind of progressed from there. Another teacher here at Mark Twain, the second grade teacher, I have to give him credit because he gave me the website. So he gave me the name of the website that he subscribes to, and you can get anybody's address from this website, mostly celebrities. You know, Tiger Woods, Taylor Swift, I mean absolutely anybody that you can get their address. So I typed in World War II survivors, Pearl Harbor survivors, and like Vietnam survivors or soldiers. I had never done this project before, and I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if we would get all of the letters returned or if we would get nothing returned to us, you know, and I thought, well, either way, it doesn't matter, you know. So, so then after I found all of those addresses, then the students paired up, so they worked in pairs. We, as a class, we kind of wrote a preliminary letter just saying, you know, we're fourth graders in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and we've been studying for Veterans Day all of the various wars, and if you are able to, would you please answer some questions? That's kind of what our cover letter said. And then within the pairs, they each group came up with about 5 or 6 questions that they wanted to ask to their veteran. Now, the website that I got the names from, they did give me a little bit of information. So like I did, you know, it said that some of them, they would be generals or fighter aces, you know, or pilots or whatever. So it gave a little bit of information, just a short amount of information on that website too. So then I was able to kind of help the groups tailor their questions a little bit to kind of match whatever that person, you know, whatever their experiences would be. So we sent out the letters. We had self-addressed stamped envelopes that we sent with them so that the veterans could just stick a letter, you know, stick their letter in and send it right back to us. And so then we kind of waited after we mailed them all off. We waited, and then we started getting returns back. We sent 14 letters out, and we got 6 letters returned to us that the veterans one of them typed the letter back to us, and most of them just hand wrote the answers. Some of them wrote a lot of information, and some of them just wrote, you know, a simple yes or no answer to the questions as well. So the amount of information kind of varied on the person. The information that we got back is just amazing. I've been trying to explain to the students how these stories aren't going to be around for very much longer. You know, and so I've been really trying to stress the importance of these letters and the information that we got back, because a lot of the soldiers, a lot of the veterans that wrote back are 88, you know, 87 and 88 years old. So, you know, these stories aren't going to be around for very much longer, and the fact that they took the time to write to us and to write down their memories of these things is very, very neat. And so, yeah, some of the information that we got back is just amazing. Like, there are just not very many people that have these memories and you know, in what they saw happen in 1 second. You know, one of the veterans wrote back what he remembered and saw of Pearl Harbor, and it just, you know, must have been a couple minutes worth of time, and just in that instant so much happened, and he was able just to write his experiences out and just to explain to us what he saw and what he remembers from that day. And even however many years later now, even as an 88-year-old man, these memories are very clear and very powerful in his mind still. One of the gentlemen that wrote back, he is the president of the Pearl Harbor Survivor Association. So he wrote down his experiences from what he saw in the war, but then he also sent back 6 autographed, bios basically. And it has the picture of the veteran when they were in the war, and then a picture of what they look like today. And the ship, many of them have the ship that they were stationed on as well. And then on the back of those cards, then it has their experiences as well of what happened to them during Pearl Harbor, where they were. And then they are also autographed, an authentic autograph by each of those veterans as well. One of the gentlemen was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. He didn't write a whole lot of information, but just mentioned how he flew the planes and sent a little card of himself. So we saw him again as a veteran, and now, he was still in his, kind of dressed up in his uniform or veteran's uniform. And then just explaining that he was part of the Tuskegee Airmen, which is, also a very cool just memory that he has. And then another one of the gentlemen sent a photograph of himself in his airplane sitting in Okinawa. So, and on the bottom it just says, "All in a day at Okinawa." And so there he sits in his plane, just smiling there, waiting to take off, and there he sits in Japan, in Okinawa. Another one of the really cool letters that we got back, the gentleman answered each of the questions on the kids' interview questions, but then he wrote an additional 1-page letter about his experiences as well. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor. He was stationed on I think the USS Oklahoma, I believe. He was one of the watchmen, so he was high up in the structure of the ship. So as he goes on in his letter, he turned his head and he saw the first wave of Japanese bombers flying over. He watched them come in. He watched them drop the first torpedoes, and he calls them fish in quotation marks in his letters. He said he saw them drop the first fish. And then it said he turned his head to the left and he saw low torpedo bomber planes that were flying and dropping torpedoes, again fish, straight at his ship. And it says that his ship was hit by 9 to 12 torpedoes. And they had opened up all of their watertight integrity because just the next morning, on Monday morning, the admiral was going to come and inspect their ship. So none of their, all of their watertight integrity was open. So they could not counter flood. This is what he says in the letter. They had no way to counter flood. So with 9 to 12 torpedoes hitting their ship, it says that they rolled over in 11.5 minutes. And in that 11.5 minutes, there were 429 crew members of the 1,250 total on their ship that died, that were killed in that one memory. And so, and then that guy ended up living, obviously. He was a survivor. And then he ended up going on 11 more invasions in the South Pacific. He spent his whole time in the South Pacific and went on 11 more invasions in Japan. And it just said, he's fortunate that he never got wounded. Nothing ever happened to him. And so that was just one of the really cool stories that we got back, that here this guy is, and he can remember turning his head to the left and watching these fish being dropped in the water straight at his ship. And it just is, just to have that memory is just amazing. The students have been very excited to get all of them back. I have been keeping the original copies of all of the letters and making photocopies for them to take home to their parents and show their parents. So we all get together in a group on the floor. We sit on the floor in our reading corner, which is back here, and then I would just read the letters out loud to the kids and just read the stories to the veterans, and on the back, or read the stories to the students. On the back of the bios of the cards from the Pearl Harbor, then we kind of just passed them around so that the students could look at them themselves. And a lot of the pictures that the veterans sent back, I just kind of passed them around because they didn't photocopy very well. So that they were at least able to look at those things. And not everybody has gotten a response back. And so even for those students that haven't gotten a response back, just getting at least photocopies of the other kids' stories are kind of neat for them, and then they've been taking them home. And they're just very excited, and they have just a very genuine interest in the veteran stories and in the information that we get back. And like I said, I've been trying to really impress on them how amazing it is that we are holding these stories in our hands, and just the fact that these stories are not going to be around for very much longer. So they've just been really excited. A lot of them have checked out books from the library, more books on these topics. I've heard from a lot of parents that the students are at home researching more, on the internet and just finding out more about these wars. And just to kind of follow up, especially with the World War II part of it, we read the book Number the Stars. I read that as a read aloud, and that is about World War II as well. And so then, so we've just really been kind of engrossed in this project, and it kind of continued all through November and not just the week of Veterans Day. And they, like I said, they have just really taken a genuine interest.
Well, for Veterans Day, Mrs. Walters decided to write to veterans, and I was awesome, because I was really interested in World War II. So when we got our letter back, I was really excited. I asked where he fought and if he drove what plane did he drive and stuff. He said that he flew a Hellcat and he fought the Japanese, and that he fought in the Pacific. My grandpa, he was in the Navy, and he was a flagman.
In World War II?
Uh-huh.
So you were already kind of interested in World War II before this started. Why were you interested in the first place?
I don't really know. I just started reading about World War II, and I was getting interested in it.
Okay. After you heard back from your veteran, were you even more interested?
Uh-huh.
What did you do after that? Did you go to the library, maybe look some stuff up at home?
Well, I went to my house and got my books and read about it. We wrote to a guy named Benjamin and asked him questions. It just answered all those questions. He was 88 years old. He flew an F-6F Hellcats Grumman. And he was 20 when he joined the war. I learned that he had to shoot down 5 Japanese planes to become an ace.
On many of them, I think probably 4 out of the 6 mentions something about the fact that it's really good that we're studying. We must learn from our nation's past, or we must learn from our great nation's wars that we fought, or we must not let history repeat itself too. That was another thing that was mentioned. And one of the gentlemen wrote something about study hard and listen to your teacher, because that's the way that you're going to get ahead in life. And so I thought that was neat too. But they've been very just receptive and very thankful that we wrote to them to hear their stories. So it's been a very positive response and feeling that we're getting from the veterans. I am absolutely going to do it again. I'm hoping to do it for as long as I can find veterans that are still alive and able to write back. And who knows for how many years that will still be. I don't know. Now, one of the letters that we did get back was from a gentleman from the Vietnam War. He was a prisoner of war in the Hanoi prison camp for 8 years. And one of the questions that the students asked him was he able to escape from the prison camp? And he answered that it was impossible to escape because the prison was in the center of the city, and the Vietnamese population is so dense, there's so many of them. And then he said, and we look nothing like the Vietnamese people. So he just said there was absolutely no way that they could have escaped. And unfortunately with that story, it doesn't say how he ever got out of the prison. I'm assuming that the war ended, the camp was freed, and the prisoners were returned to their original countries. I'm not sure. I would like to find out some more information about that one. I just think it was such a neat response that we got back, and so I just think that everybody should know these stories. It's an honor to have these stories in my hand, and to actually have the veterans have written out all of their memories, not all of them, but some of their most memorable, times that they had. And so it's been very neat, and it is been my honor to share the stories.